Today on Energy Contact, our spine is our main vertical structure. It has to be hard and durable to support us. But it's the soft stuff that's inside of it, inside this shell, that allows us to move and feel. And if we want, it puts us in touch with our core. So beneath your hard exterior, you're just a softie. Today, we're going to take a look at all that and get in touch with your soft inner self. It's coming up right now on Energy Contact.
He ain't gonna worry and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and I'll keep my mind on better things. He ain't gonna worry and I ain't gonna complain. I'm gonna drive away all these doubts I've been keeping and I'll keep my mind on better things.
Hello, and welcome to Energy Contact. My name is Joseph Willenbrink. Thank you for joining me today, and thank you to the production staff here in the studio for helping me get my message out to you. Energy Contact is a series that I'm presenting as a public service. It's about attaining perfect health, growth, self-improvement, happiness, and it's about realizing your full potential. It's designed to present you a new way of seeing yourself and a new way of seeing the world around you. We're talking about things that have to do with making energetic contact with yourself internally and with your environment. There's no difference between the body, the mind, the spirit, the emotion, the intellect, the ego. There's no difference between mass and energy. We love to separate and categorize and classify, but there's just no difference. And so all that health and self-improvement, they take place at the interface, at the point where we make all of that unseen energetic business make contact with this physical self. So we're presenting on these programs a brand new paradigm that happens to be thousands of years old. We're presenting extraordinary topics for ordinary people. And let's move right ahead with that and put up our first slide. Everyone please know that I am not a doctor. I don't want to be a doctor. This show is not a medical advice show. I don't give medical advice. I call myself an energy healer, so might a lot of other people. But state, federal, and local governments absolutely do not. There's a lot of important information on this slide, so we're going to leave it up there for a second and let you read it thoroughly and with awareness. And when you're done, if you would, go locate a pencil and paper. Here's why. At the end of this show, we're going to run some credits. When those credits run, there's going to be contact information for me. I invite and encourage you to contact me. I hope you will. But in order to contact me, you're going to need to get that contact information. And in order to get that, you're going to need a pencil and paper. It's not up there too long, so please locate the pencil and paper now. All right. Everybody got that? Let's come back up here. Today's show is show number 27. If you're tuning in for the first time, thank you. Thank you and welcome. I think there's plenty of information on this show that'll be of interest to you. Hopefully you'll find the show educational and maybe even a touch entertaining. These shows are sequential. They do build. So I am building on topics that have been presented on previous shows, but I'm doing my very best to make each show have great value on a standalone basis. If, after watching the show, you're just delighted with it, and if it is one of your first times watching, well, please look around because there are previous shows airing later, either here in this neighborhood or perhaps in another cable area where one of your friends live. All right, and last administrative chore, it is with great pleasure that I introduce my co-host to you. We're going to bring Slim on camera here, and I'm going to introduce the brains of this outfit. This is Slim. Since we're investigating what it is that energy contacts in the physical self, we have to know a couple of things, don't we? We have to know something about energy, and this show is certainly about energy. But that energy out there does us no good. We have to know what the energy contacts. Slim is here to help us understand those things in us that the energy contacts. Remember, a body without energy is just a corpse. An energy without a body, it might be a number of wonderful things, but none of them are human. All right, Slim is here to help us understand that interface. Okay, so previously on Energy Contact, we have been discussing the body intellect. We've been discussing the body intellect and the anatomy that it builds. We've seen how the same material in our brains that give us thought, reason, recall, logic, memory, all those things that we think are brain things, those same materials that create that cause that, they're in every cell of our body. So we are indeed creatures of our own thought. We've been looking here recently at our spines, both structurally, and also we've been looking at some of the non-structural functions. We've been looking at the nervous system that runs through that spine in the past few shows. Last show we looked at the peripheral nervous system, and specifically at the enteric nervous system. We'll explain those terms again in a minute. We saw that there is a close, tangible relationship between what's going on in our spine and what's going on in our core. Much closer than anything in the realm of analogy or cliche. In addition to all this, we've spoken just a little bit about that mystical energy that the old Indian mystics used to call Kundalini energy. And we've seen what all of this has to do with our core. Well, today we're going to hop back in where we left our nervous system last time, in our intestines, and we're going to climb back up, back out of our core, out of our guts, and up into our spine. We've seen that all these nervous system functions involve the non-structural applications of the spine, but today we're going to see, non-structural or not, that structure is crucial. It's necessary even for those non-structural functions. And we're going to see how this bony spine we have protects our fragile and sophisticated nervous systems. So our spine has a lot of work to do, structurally and otherwise. Soon we'll see what a compromised structure will do to our nervous system. And the answer quickly is bad things. Ultimately, we'll get to an understanding of how we block the flow of energy in ourselves. And knowing that, how to unclog it. And then how to allow our spine to facilitate that upward flow of that Kundalini energy. So hang on, because today we're going to look at a lot of dry anatomy and dry anatomical vocabulary. But when we're done, I think you'll see that it was worth the effort. But now, it's the fun part of our show. It's the part where we visualize. We're going to take our virtual field trip, a journey in our mind's eye. And today, we're going to go to a construction site. It's a large commercial industrial building that's being built in this construction site, and we are going to work with the electrician. We're running wiring from the big central electrical switch box out to the perimeters of the place. And in order to do that, we're going to need to get some wiring. So that electrician goes out and comes back in with a bunch of wire. And you look at it, and actually it doesn't look like wire at all. It's just hard galvanized pipe. And so you tell him, hey, wait a minute. I've been watching Energy Contact, and I know that energy doesn't flow through rigid mass like that. You must have the wrong material. Energy only flows through pliable, flexible mass. And he replies, you know what? You're right. This piping that you're looking at is only a casing. It's not the wire. This stuff is called conduit. There's a flexible wire inside. That's what's carrying the energy. This sheath is just a protective coating to keep that wire secure, to keep it armored. And then he lifts up a cross-section of the pipe, and sure enough, inside there's pliable wire. So we've got 3 layers in this conduit. We've got the wire, what would be just bare metal wire, and it's covered by a plastic coating, which makes that wire look like any electrical wire in your house, an extension cord or anything like that. But then this encased wire, this rubbery encased wire, is sheathed in this conduit. All right, so take a last glance at that conduit, and then look over there and take another last glance at that big electrical main switch box there, and then hold that thought. The structure of our spine provides a protective pipe to the spinal cord. On the last few shows, we've been concerned with our peripheral nervous system, the stuff that's way out from that pipe, the part of us that operates involuntarily, automatically, or in our terms, solely on body intellect. And we've seen that spine to gut, that spine to core connection. Today, we're tracing our way back up from the gut, back into the central nervous system. But to understand that, we're going to need to review the enteric system that we investigated the last show. The enteric system, you'll recall, is a unique part of that autonomic, automatic, peripheral nervous system business. We'll explain that in a little more detail. Okay, so let's take a moment to review that nervous system. Let's bring up a slide. Here's a slide you've seen before. The nervous system in general can be thought of as the chief coordinating agency of all the body parts and functions, sort of like the function of an orchestra conductor. There are two basic divisions of the nervous system, and you see them there, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. You see that central nervous system there on the left of that picture. There's a brain and also something that resembles a spine, but look closely because there's no vertebrae in that picture. Also notice that whatever it is a lot shorter than a spine. Well, that's the spinal cord. It looks a little like a snake, doesn't it? Well, on the right side of that screen, there is the peripheral nervous system. That's what we've been looking at previously. We won't look at it much today. We just want to know that it hooks in to that central system. So all the peripheral stuff is plugged into the central system. All right, let's come back up here. That central nervous system then, it's the master system, huh? It's the master switch box. And what it does is it processes incoming sensory information and sends out outgoing motor commands. Remember, sensory in the nervous system terms, sensory is what we sense in our perimeters. If I touch something, that's my sensory system that feels it. And motor then is what my central nervous system tells it. For example, I go to pick a rose and I touch a thorn. I sense the sharpness in the central system. Let go. All right, so we saw at the very end of the peripheral system, switching gears on you, there was a system called the enteric system that thinks and works differently than any other part of the nervous system, peripheral, central, or otherwise. It operates using a completely different brain. As we saw, it's the instinctive brain that's the same as the instinctive brain located in all pre-vertebrates. Vertebrates means having a backbone. So this brain that's left over from creatures evolutionarily before there was such a thing as a spine and a brain, this was their brain, and we've got it. And it's located, guess where? In our intestines, in our core. As we evolved, well, brains and spines evolved. But instead of replacing that instinct brain, they just hooked in, they just caused it to plug in as well, just like hooking a microchip into a larger supercomputer. So that enteric system predates vertebrates, but it's still present in all of us. That's why, even though you are so darn smart, you still function off of instinct and stimulus. So we've got two brains, and one of them's in the core. And that explains the close connection between having spine and having guts. And, as we see, having nerve. Why, by the way, is this news to you? Why didn't you learn about your second grade in grade school? Because they didn't know what to tell you. Modern science didn't even know we had an enteric nervous system until the mid-1970s. And they still don't know too much about it. They don't know how to explain it to you. But it's sort of a key missing link, if you will, between Western science and all of that old alternative stuff that people have been poo-pooing for years, huh? All those mystic witch doctors who were being burned at the stake for centuries talking about this link, all the people who were written off as lunatics and heretics and being ostracized, well, guess what? They were right. And we learned it somewhere in 1970-something. You know who else was right? Those old yogis and mystics meditating in the woods 10,000 years ago. So, if we got two brains, something has to connect them, huh? What is it that connects the gut brain to the nervous system that we've known about, the part that we have known about for centuries? Well, nerves, of course. and a bunch of them. One of those nerves is called the vagus nerve. It's spelled V-A-G-U-S, so it's spelled a little different than Las Vegas. Although both words mean the same thing, they both mean wanderers. So just for trivia, Las Vegas, the city, was named as a place to stop when you're wandering in the desert. All right, the vagus nerve is by far the longest of what is known as the cranial nerves. And it goes all the way from our brain to guess where? Our core, our intestines, our enteric nervous system. The term cranial nerves has a specific meaning that we'll look at in the future. But suffice it to say for right now that that brain is making it that whole, or that, excuse me, that vagus nerve is making it the whole way from the brain to the core. But we're going the other way. Energy falls up. So we're climbing out of that enteric nervous system and we're trying to get back up our spine so we can find the electrical wiring and so we can find what that conduit is doing. To retrace those steps, we're going to climb up from the enteric system through the spine via that vagus nerve. And that will lead us to the spinal cord. So we should know something about what the spinal cord is. But hold that thought. First, what makes the nervous system work, just in general? Well, duh, nerves. That's what makes it work. But that's far from the complete picture. There's other things too. Lots of them. There's the brain, the spine, so on. But the foot soldiers of all of this activity are the nerves themselves and the neurons, which are the cells in the nerves. We have billions and billions of nerve cells, but any introductory anatomy course will tell you about the big 86. We have 12 pairs of cranial nerves and 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Get out your calculators and that will add up to 86. The vagus nerve is one of those 12 pairs of cranial nerves. For our purpose, we can think of all nerves, all neurons, all nerve cells coming some way, somehow, out of one of these 43 pairs of nerves in our body. Let's bring up another slide, and we'll take just one last loving glance at our peripheral nervous system, and you'll see some of what those 31 nerves in our spine are doing. This is going to bring us to our spinal cord in a minute. There's that slide. See all those little dots and wires and stuff? Those spinal nerves are what operate all this peripheral stuff we've been looking at. The blinking and the pupil dilation and constriction, heartbeat, what speeds it up, slows it down, the churning motion of peristalsis, all these things emanate from those spinal nerves. And the spinal nerves come from the spinal cord. All right, so what does this have to do with wiring and conduit? Well, remember the peripheral system plugs into the central system, which runs through the spinal cord. But we have seen already that the spinal cord is not the spine. Well, what is it then? Where does it come from? Let's bring up another picture. Okay, the spinal cord is a continuation of the brain, really. You've seen that one side before, and you can see it as a continuation of the brain. It exits the brain as an extension of it, as an extension of the brain stem, through a hole called the foramen magnum in the skull. We'll look at a foramen magnum in a minute, but in anatomy, whenever you hear the word foramen, it means a hole or a port. It's just a fancy word for a hole. Then, that spinal cord comes out of that hole in the bottom of our skull, same hole that our spine or our spinal column comes out of, and it continues through other holes, other foramen, ports in the spine called vertebral foramen. Don't get lost in all this vocabulary here. We're going somewhere with it. The spinal cord, then, is the electrical wire that runs inside the conduit. So we'll see that those vertebral foramen work sort of like the conduit. And that spinal cord, just like any electrical wire, carries a lot of current through it. But you know what else? Take another look at that spinal cord there. It's too short. It's shorter than the spine, as we're about to see. Look at the bottom of either one of those pictures. The nerves are continuing after the cord ends. And at the bottom, it looks like a horse's tail a little bit. Well, funny you should mention that because that's what somebody named it. That collection of nerve down there on the bottom is called the cauda equina, which means horsetail. All right, so you can think of the brain that's up there on the right side of that picture as the big master electrical box, and the conduit that runs out of it is what we're looking at. Part of that, and part of that spine is part of the galvanized pipe. Let's come back here. If anything severs that cable, by the way, energy stops flowing at that point, exactly the same as an electrical cord. Anything beyond the point where the sever happens is where electricity no longer gets to. It's where energy no longer gets to. So, again, to recap, the spinal cord is the soft, pliable, coated wiring that's placed in a tough, protective structure. So now, we're going to take a look at that on Slim. And we're going to spin Slim around here in a second. Let's go ahead and do it now. So I told you I'd tell you about the foramen magnum. You can't really see up here, but you can imagine it's just a big hole in the bottom of our skull, huh? The spinal cord, the spinal column, everything comes out of it. Harder to see on this picture, although we'll see it. In all of these little vertebrae here, there's a hole right inside that, and that's where the spinal cord runs. And there's 31 pairs of them. If you see, it's hard to see. Slim has the nerves that come out of there, and if you look very carefully in here, you can just maybe see how they're represented. If I had paints, I would have painted them blue or something. But there they are on this side and this side, and those are the nerves. Those are all going out. Remember that diagram we saw that had all the parts hooked up to it? Well, that's what they were talking about. That's what that plugs into it. So there they are. And the spinal cord is located in there. There are just lots of parts of them. But remember, the spinal cord is too short. The length of the spinal cord is much longer than the length of that bony spinal column. As a matter of fact, as the camera pans down, I'll show you where the spinal cord ends. It ends right about here. Okay, so from the last rib down, the nerves that branch out from the spinal cord and through the lumbar and sacral levels must run through these holes in the spine without a cord. Well, there is no cord, but there is the protection of those vertebral foramen, and there's also the protection of something called the dural sheath. All right, those spinal nerves, they're easier to see down here, lumbar and below, because there's a little less protection there. That's the part of Slim called the cauda equina. As we move up to the top, the nerves hide. Well, Slim doesn't really have a spinal cord per se. He does have those nerves coming out. The existence of the spinal cord is sort of telegraphed by the fact that it's just more difficult to see where these nerves are up here. All right, I'm going to turn Slim back around, otherwise I'll feel like he's shunning me. And as I do that, let's bring up another slide. We're going to bring up a slide so I can show you the vertebral foramen. The vertebral foramen is just the holes, all those holes in the vertebra. They're difficult to see on Slim. So we'll bring up that slide, and what you'll see on the right side there, in the dark picture, that's one of Slim's vertebrae just picked up and held to the light there. And you can see the hole there, right inside those little pointy things we were grabbing. Now imagine a bunch of those things stacked up. That's what the spinal cord goes through. And so you can see that maybe more than conduit, this stuff's like a gooseneck on a microphone stand, or you see some gooseneck electrical wires sometimes. Those spines stacked up, they're flexible, but they still make a hard casing for that spinal cord. All right, on the left side, you can see the spinal cord is very snugly and safely nestled in to that hole. So the spine is protecting all that neural network that's making its way from the control box out to the individual plugs and appliances that we'll eventually put into our building. And as we've said, there's a lot of current running through that. Let's go right to the next view of that, and you'll see another view of a vertebra and a spinal cord. Look here in this picture, you can see it all. There's the vertebra, there's the hole, the foramen, there's the spinal cord, there's the nerves. You can see how that looks like the nerves that we saw coming out of Slim's spine. And there's that dura coating that we mentioned a couple minutes ago. All that stuff is protected inside the hole, inside the vertebral foramen, but the cord itself is protected inside other stuff, just like the wire connected inside the plastic coating, which is then inside the hard galvanized pipe. So let's take a minute and look deeper into the coating of the wire. And keep in mind as we go through the details of the wiring chart that our goal is not to understand the details of the central nervous system anatomy. You can get that from any anatomy class. But rather our goal is to understand the mechanical things that we use, that our body intellect uses to create ourselves. Let's come back here. All right, so if thoughts are building our anatomy, then, as is in the case of all building projects, they need tools. We want to be aware of the tools that are building us. Anatomy teachers, doctors, and scientists are blind to some of these tools. Well, some of them are. Why? Because it's all new, even though it should be obvious. Well, when this stuff becomes obvious to you, you will see through the unreal and build yourself any way you choose. All right, so we have looked at the control box and the conduit. What's inside that cord? Neurons for the most part. What are neurons? Well, they're just nerve cells. They're just regular nerve cells, except that they're carrying electricity. So what about the electricity it conducts? Well, those nerve cells, those neurons, send electrical signals. They send energy. They are electrochemical in nature, but we won't get sidetracked into all that, because what we want to understand is that the energy that your brain and your spinal cord use to send out these signals, it's no different than the energy that runs your stereo, that runs your computer, your oven, your lights. It's no different than the energy that runs your word processor or anything in this building project that we're putting in the conduit for. And you know what else? It's no different than the energy that keeps Mars from bumping into Jupiter. And it's no different than any other energy that runs you. Energy somehow has intelligence. It has awareness. That awareness connects from our brain out to every cell of our body. And you are a creation of its energy. By the way, there's no difference between mass and energy either. All right, so that's about all the time we have for today. Remember this stuff, and next show we'll go in deeper. We'll find more of the stuff that's inside the spinal cord, and we'll take it right up into our brain. And we'll see how we can use that information to build ourselves and rebuild ourselves. For now, I wish you peace and positive energy and a healthy life.